We are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Reconstitution. Wait for folks to trickle in. I know some of these streams are still spinning up, but today we are going to be discussing people over party and what does that mean? People over party, it's kind of obvious, but the solutions are less obvious. Um, just to start with the problem that we're dealing with, I think everyone knows is the entrenchment that our political system currently has with respect to the two parties, the establishment parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. That seems to be an unbreakable bond between politics and parties. And I would say almost universally, people are unhappy with the status quo options they have. Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, which is why we see on the edges of these two parties candidates who are really not good fits for those parties, independents otherwise. Bernie Sanders, who is generally an independent but becomes a Democrat so that he has a chance of winning in an election. Donald Trump, who really isn't a Republican but used the Republican Party to get a platform and to become a possible candidate for president. So people are voting for these more independent candidates, whether it's Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders or otherwise, because people are unhappy with the status quo. And that status quo is defined by the Republicans and the Democrats, the two-party system that has been in place for centuries. Ultimately, it's been under different names at one time or another, but ultimately, it's always been these two parties: a conservative party, a liberal party. But even more sadly is that now the Democrats aren't necessarily completely liberal, and the Republicans aren't conservative. They've taken on these other meanings, sort of a hodgepodge of positions and values that really are emergent principles that are tailored completely just to get voters to whatever works for them to be as profitable as they can, in the sense that votes are profits. And of course, profits are profits because of the money and power entanglement that we've discussed in a previous constitutional conversation. So the big question on everyone's minds is, how do we get out of this, right? If it's been so entrenched for so long, how can we enable more political independence CE, and empower political independence TS, to get into power and to be able to shake the system up? And I don't think the answer is for independent candidates to have to temporarily join into a party to be able to even have a chance in an election. That is not helpful to the party, it's not helpful to the candidate, and it's not helpful to the people. And there are very straightforward ways to handle this and to deal with this. There are other ways that are maybe more indirect, but actually even more effective in breaking the strangleholds that our two-party system has on democracy and on the American system of politics and government. And so why don't we start there? The most simple way of getting parties out of politics and to restore power to the people and to independent people and to politically independent candidates is to, you guessed it, get parties out of politics. And what I mean by that is, when you go, so there's a couple things. When you go to the polls and you vote on a ballot, or if you have a mail-in ballot, you look at that ballot and you see a bunch of names. But what are next to those names? The names of parties. And those parties are parties essentially that have endorsed the candidate or that the candidate belongs to. But let's just ask ourselves the really, sort of straightforward question that maybe we should be asking ourselves, but we've sort of taken for granted, is why should the party name even be on the ballot, right? If you don't already know what party they belong to, you're probably not so in the loop as to what's going on in the election. And if you're only voting for a candidate because they belong to, quote unquote, your party, maybe you haven't done enough research to know that that's the candidate you want to vote for. Just because you're a Democrat and they're a Democrat, you don't know who that person is or what they stand for or what they've done in their life or what their character is. That's not a reason to vote for someone. So why don't we just remove the parties from the ballots? It doesn't mean that in all likelihood, if you're a Democrat, you'll probably vote for a Democrat anyway, but we don't need that constant reminder on a ballot, especially for the cases where you really don't know who that candidate is. So the acknowledgement by the system of these political parties as something that's important makes them important. And I do want to say, it's not to say that we should ban political parties. You can't do that. We have the right to free assembly, so there is the right to form a political party. And the founding fathers knew, and they said this in the Federalist Papers and in all the commentary about the Constitution, factions are inevitable. It's a part of human nature, and we see it throughout human history. So we're not going to eliminate parties, nor should we. Political parties are useful in organizing and getting an agenda together and getting a platform together. The problem is that it's so entrenched in our system. And so removing it from the ballot, why does it need to be there? There's no reason that we have to list the party name on the ballot. It just validates their existence as a duopoly over our system. The other place we can remove it is from our parliamentary procedures. So the Speaker of the House represents the majority party of the House, is chosen by the majority party of the House. Now, that's not written in the Constitution anywhere. It's not even in the laws anywhere. It's just a parliamentary procedure that somehow has gotten onto the books in the House of Representatives. And ultimately, we take that as a given, but it doesn't have to be. And the reason it's there is because political leaders, who are also leaders of parties, are the ones who put it there. And that keeps it there. So if we had a way of saying as a fundamental principle of our country that we don't want parties within politics, we're okay with parties existing just outside of government, then perhaps we can start to untangle some of this and divorce the power that parties have over our systems. So that's two ways, but mostly really the umbrella here is get parties out of official processes. The government does not need to sanction parties as a legitimate form of organization within government. It can be a legitimate form of organization outside of government, but there is nothing on the books to suggest that for some reason we need to organize the House, the Senate, and especially the Supreme Court, which is now seeming to go in that direction, along party lines. It just shouldn't exist there. There is another way called ranked choice voting, or an additional way that I think we can really improve the system, and perhaps the most important way. Before I go there, though, I do have some comments coming in, and I want to make sure that I address them so that folks feel involved. We have one person who has said, Never Going One has said, ranked choice voting, open primaries, eliminate private funding of elections. Perfect. We are getting to ranked choice voting. That's the next thing I was going to discuss. Open primaries is a great suggestion that we do want to discuss in more detail. We do not have it in our current proposals, primarily because saying that primaries should be open is acknowledging parties, because primaries are for parties, not for elections of officials, right? It's elections to determine who represents parties in the elections. So it is our opinion, as of right now, it could change, that primaries are up to the party, whatever the party wants to do. Keep it out of politics, right? But ranked choice voting, if we implemented it, and we'll get into why, would probably negate the need for an open primary, because people could run as independents and not have anything to lose anyway. And so it probably breaks open primaries essentially so wide that the primaries become part of the election, and the whole distinction between primary elections and general elections actually starts to disappear. And eliminating private funding of elections, also another interesting proposal. I suggest you go back and watch our proposal on the separation of money in politics, where we go into a little bit more detail on that. We have some really interesting suggestions there, not exactly eliminating private funding, but severely limiting it and making serious and important conditions around who can donate to campaigns. And it's quite an innovative proposal that I haven't heard of yet, so we'd love to get your feedback on that. Never Going One, you also said, unfortunately, right now we have to vote for democracy. I 100% agree with that. It is very scary what's going on right now. There's anti-democratic sentiment. I mean, ultimately, the very far right is ultimately saying that we don't live in a democracy. They say we live in a constitutional republic, which is true. We do live in a constitutional republic. The problem is that that is not mutually exclusive from democracy. And of course, more importantly, the whole idea of undermining the integrity of our elections and saying that if we don't win, the other side cheated. I mean, these are things that need to stop. And we do have to vote for democracy. I would agree with that. And yes, on the Electoral College, it creates a winner-take-all situation. I suggest you go back and watch our video on the third chamber of Congress, which talks a little bit about some of our plans there. It is indirectly related to the Electoral College, but I think you'll get my point if you watch that video, where we're going with that as far as dealing with the counter-majoritarian problem, the tyranny of the majority, and how we can deal with that in a more effective way than the Electoral College or the Senate does. So thank you for those questions or comments. Never go in one. Really appreciate them. So let me get to, I know, Leonard, you have a comment here on ranked choice voting. I will get to it in a second, but as soon as I first explain what ranked choice voting is to everyone else on this call. So ranked choice voting, some of you may be familiar with it, but it is it's a straightforward concept, but then it's hard to wrap your brain around how it actually works and then why it works so well. So essentially, rather than just voting for a candidate, I have 10 candidates and I have to choose one. This allows me to rank, to prioritize, to choose by preference of the order of candidates. And some candidates, you may not even rank at all and just say, nope, I will never give my vote to this person. I don't care if they're my last 10 out of 10 choice. I'd rather make them 11. So the point is, though, that rather than just being able to say, that's my person, you can say, well, that's my second choice, that's my third choice, that's my fourth choice. And what happens then is if your first choice is some independent candidate that probably isn't going to win, you don't create this feedback loop, this self-fulfilling prophecy, self-defeating prophecy, actually, that, well, they probably won't win, so I shouldn't vote for them because that's a waste of a vote. Because everyone's thinking that way, that candidate ends up not winning. And that's a perpetuating cycle because, right? Well, everyone else is thinking that they're not going to win, so they're not going to waste their vote, so I'm not going to waste my vote, so they don't win, and they don't have a chance of winning, so I don't waste my vote. And it sort of goes in that circle, right? So if I had the guarantee, because of the way the system is set up, that I could vote for whoever I want, and then say, you know what, if that person gets eliminated because they just don't have the votes that are necessary, that candidate, that your vote then goes to your second choice and you don't lose your vote. That's the beauty, right? And then if that second choice is also eliminated because maybe they were also an independent with not a big backing, even though you loved them, then it goes to your third choice and down the line. And so ultimately it eliminates that concern with really voting your conscience and voting for who you believe should be the candidate. And it allows you to speak your mind more truly without needing to sacrifice basically standing up for, standing against someone that maybe you really would like to make sure is not voted in. And so what happens there, as you can probably infer, is that this allows independent or third-party candidates to have a chance because there's no chance that they're a spoiler anymore. There's no chance that this third-party candidate, let's say, runs for office and that suddenly splits the vote between these two people and then this third person takes it all, right? It eliminates that problem. So ranked choice voting, and ranked choice voting has been implemented all over the country, Alaska, Maine, New York City, in local elections, in state elections, et cetera. And it's increasing, and we just need to constitutionalize it, and we need to make it official that is the case everywhere because it is the most fair and impactful upgrade to democracy I think we have in this entire project. And it's possible, and people believe in it. And it's something that the Forward Party, Andrew Yang's third party, is pushing for heavily for all the obvious reasons. It's in their interest to push for it because it enables them to actually potentially win elections eventually. But they are sort of stuck in this problem of, well, if we're pro ranked choice voting, we're not going to get into office because the two-party system that has control doesn't want ranked choice voting. And round and round we go. So how do we do that? We need a movement from the people to really push for this and to have awareness of what ranked choice voting is, to be asking for it and to understand how important it is. So with that, I'm going to turn to Leonard's question. So, and I'm so glad you're asking this question, Leonard. I don't know if you were here last week or the week before whenever I brought this up, but I think I actually brought it up in a TikTok response video. But the relationship between ranked choice voting and gerrymandering. And I think before I get into your comments, I'm wondering if I'm going to touch on what you're about to say, which is that does ranked choice voting actually eliminate the need to address gerrymandering? Is it even possible to gerrymander a district in a ranked choice voting world? Is that too difficult? Also, is there even any such thing, any such thing as a wasted vote, which is the whole principle of how we would end gerrymandering, is to minimize the number of wasted votes. But if there are no wasted votes because we have ranked choice voting, then does gerrymandering just sort of disappear on its own by virtue of implementing ranked choice voting? So it's an interesting thing that we've been discussing, is that a proposal within the Reconstitution that's now redundant by virtue of ranked choice voting. Now, for the rest of your comment, Leonard, while I did miss the discussion for gerrymandering, I did watch the video after and go look up what the efficiency gap is. My question is how the efficiency gap could be defined in an ranked choice voting situation where, since no primaries are allowed in any given race, each party may have multiple candidates. Would the efficiency gap still be calculated on a party basis? Also, for each round of ranked choice voting, the calculation of the efficiency gap would be different, with the calculation for the winning round be the one used. The only downside is that you could use is that you could not compute the efficiency gap for any parties that had already been eliminated. More generally, do you think these are questions, ones that should be set by Congress later so they can change it as needed, or should they also be worked out at the amendment level? I think I actually already nipped some of this question, what I just said, Leonard, and I'm so glad we're on the same page about this, in that I actually think that ranked choice voting might on its own be worthwhile to stand without any sort of gerrymandering reform. I personally haven't, I've actually looked into, I've done some research into how do you calculate the efficiency gap in a ranked choice voting world. I have not found any information on it. I can't seem to, and it suggests to me, and this doesn't mean that it's true, but that the efficiency gap becomes that much less relevant, if not totally irrelevant, in a ranked choice voting world. But it is something I would love to explore at one of our integration sessions, Leonard, that we have coming up. And it's a question I'm very interested in. I think your point, your latter points there on whether we should delegate sort of gerrymandering regulation to Congress and just deal with ranked choice voting in the Constitution is probably the right move. Ranked choice voting, we can see what the downstream effects are, how it does impact gerrymandering, and then allow Congress to act from there, especially if we have a Congress that is more efficient, more effective, more healthy as a result of not just ranked choice voting, but the other amendments we proposed, getting money out of politics, a third chamber of Congress, etc. All of these other things could create a better Congress anyway that could handle gerrymandering if it even still is an issue. So it is something I'd say we should heavily consider as far as removing the gerrymandering restriction provision from our second proposed amendment to in the Reconstitution. It is a very small provision, but it may be one place where it's worth slimming down the Reconstitution because it's just redundant and unnecessary. So great question. I think we're totally mind melding on that one. Ranked choice voting, again, this is why it's one of the most important principles, in my opinion, in the Reconstitution and of things that we can do as far as reforming democracy, because it does have all these sort of downstream effects that it unravels the whole thing. I always like to talk about how the Reconstitution tries to be a holistic, integrated solution to deal with the sort of whack-a-mole problem, which is you can't solve this because of this problem, but you can't solve this problem because you can't solve that problem. And if you solve this problem, it creates this new problem. The beauty of ranked choice voting, at least as I've tried to sort of follow all of the effects and impacts downstream, is that it sort of unravels the whole thing. And that's why we include ranked choice voting not only as a public elections principle, but we also implement it in our upcoming conversation on co-determination for corporations to use ranked choice voting in the elections of their board. I think ranked choice voting is just simply a upgrade to any sort of election process. Voters' voices should not be binary as far as this person or that person. The problem is obviously with elections and hearing the voices of people, um, and as far as hearing the voices of people, is that um, it's hard to filter out and to process all of that information about what people are saying if each person is allowed to say a lot. Now, fortunately, the idea of ranking, especially in this day and age where we have computers, etc., we can actually decipher and make sense of those votes, and those voices, and sort of gauge based on the intensity of people's preferences, people's rankings, come to a consensus about who the winning candidate is based on more than just a simple majority. So it's a great upgrade. Thank you, some zoned cat. I guess I played Scarface. I'll take that as a compliment. Leonard, I think it's less relevant in today's world since so little ranked choice voting actually happens, but I'm not sure it's irrelevant in a world with lots of ranked choice voting, but you may be right. It might not even be needed. Exactly. And the question becomes, and it's funny, this is something I was talking to some folks today in a different context, but it's always a little bit of like, we have this great long-term solution, but the long-term solution is going to take some work to get there and time to get there. Do we want to resolve some of these other issues in the short term and invest some of our time and effort in doing so, in this instance, gerrymandering, and simultaneously work towards this long-term solution? Or do we want to pour all of our energy and effort into the long-term solution to expedite the long-term solution? I don't have an answer to that. That's always a very difficult balance to play. But I will say that my other issue with Samargo, please feel free to ask a question. Happy to hear it, and hopefully that will make you feel more engaged. But the who do you support, Samargo? I'd love to hear. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I should not address people while I'm speaking. But yes, so gerrymandering, because it's so difficult to address in a real way. I mean, we suggested some ways: compact, contiguous districts, minimizing the efficiency gap, but even that has its issues, as some of our really engaged followers pointed out. It's not a perfect solution, and in fact, we don't know how the computers would generate these new districts, and so it's a little risky. And so when you're not really sure of the solution anyway, is it worth investing that amount of energy into something that, by the way, it'll be very difficult to implement gerrymandering reform for all the reasons that we've discussed, which is that the people in power make the decisions about how you get in power. And of course, they're going to make it easier for themselves to get in power. So that's a real big obstacle to overcome. So maybe we should just keep our eyes on the prize and focus on ranked choice voting, and gerrymandering becomes less of an issue. Samargo, who do you support, Trump or Biden? This is not about political advocacy. This is about political education and self-awareness about what you stand for, not who you stand for. So if you would, thank you so much, Ned Gary. And so that's that's what we're talking about here, is really about real issues. I don't care who wins. I would prefer that the person that wins believes in democracy and the peaceful transition of power. But I'm not here to advocate for candidates. I am here to talk about issues, and not even talk about issues, but to talk about principles and values that we should have as a country that would guide us towards solutions to these issues. So yeah, that's what we're talking about here. And so we believe in this particular conversation that we want to put people over party and get parties out of politics, because parties are in the way of getting things done. They really are. Everything you see, the filibuster, right? And here's a really important example. I appreciate that, Samargo. Maybe one day when we have enough traction. I have no interest in running for president right now, but I would if enough people genuinely ask me to. But that's not where I'm headed right now. Right now, I just want to engage enough people in having a good national conversation to bring people together, because really that's the problem, is we can't have conversations anymore. And so I want us to have conversations again. But what I was saying is that this two-party system it is really the root of our problem. And the example I was going to give is that there are times where Party X, and I'm not going to call out a specific party, I'm going to say Party X will propose legislation because they're in power and the president is part of their party, and they're like, this is a great idea, let's pass this. The other party gets into power. They weren't able to pass it. The other party gets into power. They try to pass this very same legislation. They want to pass it. The president is in their party, and suddenly that party who was just proposed that same legislation is voting against it. Why? They want the other party to fail so that they can win the next election. But when the other party fails, the country fails. And this is something that they already supported. So there's this game of sabotage of the other side constantly because they're always trying to win the next election. This is madness, absolute madness. And the funny thing is, and people will say, oh, the Democrats, the Republicans, whatever you want to say, whether the Republicans are obstructionists or the Democrats are obstructionists. Ronald Reagan, a Republican, said that, and I wish I wasn't paraphrasing right now, but you know what? I'm going to look it up so that I have the exact quote. Ronald Reagan said that there is no limit to what a man can do or where he can go if he doesn't mind who gets the credit. And the problem is we live in a world right now, in a country right now, where the opposite couldn't be more true. We get nothing done because the other side never wants to give the other side a win. And what that means is the people never get a win. We as a country never get a win because the side that's not in power doesn't want to allow the side that's in power to take credit for something and say, look, we got something done. Because in their opinion, oh my God, if the people in power can get credit for getting something good done, we'll never get the power back. Who cares? We're talking about people's lives here. We're talking about our country. And you know what? Maybe if you got on board, there'd be less differences between the parties and we could all just get something done. So that's my passion about getting parties out of politics, because it is just so in the way of everything. And it's become so divisive and so silly. It's childish games. So these are the ways, again, that I propose that we have a few ways of getting parties out of politics. One is maybe less effective but more direct, which is don't put names of parties on ballots. Don't put parties in the parliamentary rules. It doesn't matter if your party is in charge of has the majority in the House or the majority in the Senate. That has nothing to do with who the Speaker of the House is, how committees are formed. Find another way that has nothing to do with parties. Do not allow the word party or the names of parties to be in parliamentary rules and procedures. Period. It's that simple. We'll find another way, a better way, a way that actually drives consensus and a way that drives wins for the country, not for parties. The other way, which is less direct, but actually probably even more impactful, is ranked choice voting, which allows people to vote for who they actually want to vote for without wasting their vote, which enables third-party candidates, independent candidates to win because people aren't worried about wasting their vote on a candidate that isn't part of a party because they're concerned that that's going to spoil the election. So those are the two ways that we are envisioning getting parties out of politics. Let's see here. Religion and money need to leave politics. Yes, we have a whole, our very first constitutional conversation was on the separation of money in politics, and we draw the analogy to the separation of church and state, which is sort of a modern version of getting money out of politics. So I highly recommend you take a look at constitutional conversation number 2, because our first one is actually an introduction. Two-party system worked well until Citizens United empowered the far right. Very interesting point, Judson. I would say that the two-party system didn't necessarily work well. It worked better before Citizens United. And notably, Citizens United overturned a very bipartisan campaign finance reform package from the 90s, or was it the early 2000s? I forget. I think it was the 90s. McCain-Feingold campaign finance reform, and it made things far worse. And I don't necessarily mean it necessarily for the left or the right. It just got money into politics, period. It strengthened probably the establishment more than anyone, specific, so on the left and the right. So, the Mitch McConnells of the world, the Nancy Pelosi's of the world, just having people who already had a name for themselves, already had power, were given that opportunity to be able to raise more money for themselves, which gave them more power to themselves, and just kept incumbents in general, gave them more power to stay in power. Again, referring back, we did have an entire United was a big piece, very unique way in which we do that, which I highly recommend you check out because it is an intricate issue, more intricate than you would think. Nebraska, North, South Dakota, Montana, Alaska, Wyoming, and Idaho, less than 4% of the population. We agree this is another problem, and we addressed this in, I think, a few weeks ago in our third Chamber of Congress video. We talk a little bit about why our system provides those states with such a low amount of population with a disproportionately large amount of senators. There are good reasons for that, but it's not quite working anymore. It's called the counter-majoritarian problem. It's about the tyranny of the majority and counterbalancing that to represent minority interests. It's still based on a compromise from the 1700s, which is why it's not working in its current form anymore. We do have a solution for that called the Third Chamber of Congress. I highly recommend you go check it out. Yes, I think I already addressed your point about the millions of dollars in politics. Go check out our separation of money in politics video. Yes, same thing with Citizens United. John Bernthal. I've gotten this before, this John Bernthal comment. I guess I'm in The Walking Dead. Jesus is the Son of God, the way, the truth, and the life. You're entitled to your opinion, and I don't know how that's relevant here, but thank you so much for your comment. And thank you for your likes, everyone who's liking. I apologize if it looks like I'm getting some messages on TikTok that are not in the comments, but I'm not seeing how to bring them up. I apologize. I'm new-ish to TikTok Live, but if someone wants to direct me there, I'm happy to take a look. Maybe it's just in my inbox. So with that, I want to open up any other questions on this. Again, it's interesting because this issue is so important, and as a result, it's one of the few things that we can actually. I mean, I say this about a lot of our issues, but it's one of the things that not only do we agree on the problem and what the problem is, but we could probably even agree on the solution. It's pretty straightforward and pretty innovative and revolutionary, but it's not very controversial. It's just a matter of the people in power don't want us to implement it because it's threatening to them maintaining control, maintaining their own power. And so this is one of those things, and that's why movements like the Forward Party, Andrew Yang's party, is really putting emphasis on this, because they do know this is like a leverage point. This is like one of those like a trigger point that if we can just get in there and massage this one thing out, the whole system may come crashing down in a good way, not in a bad way, but in a way of exorcising the two-party system stranglehold out of our government. And so it's there. It's very easy. It's very clear. And I'm glad that movements like the Forward Party are really pushing for it, because it's going to take people power and loud people power, similarly to what has been done in Medicare for All, Green New Deal, whether you stand for those things or not. The pressure that has been put on government, the political pressure that's been put on government as a result of these movements and making them front and center has been astounding. And the reason that those things aren't passing, for good or for bad, depending on where you position, is that they are relatively party specific on who stands for them. The left stands for those issues, the right does not. Now, ranked choice voting is a little bit less of a partisan issue. So if we could push on it as the people, and it's not as partisan, maybe there's an opportunity there. And I think that's why this is such an important conversation, and why I'm so glad so many people are starting to talk about it, because this is one of those things of people just aren't aware of it. And so I think the more we can raise political awareness, the more people will be willing to jump on board and push for this. Now, the awareness is just the start. Again, it is a little complicated to wrap your head around, but once you do, it's just very simple. It's just sort of getting to the place of thinking about this and just thinking about voting in a way that's so different than we're used to. But ultimately, once you get it and it clicks, it's just so obvious. You sort of don't realize, you sort of say to yourself, why didn't we do this earlier? And so, yeah, I mean, like in a lot of things, just rank your choices. It's that simple. Um, so we have another comment from Leonard, and Hank Nally said, no, no, no. I'm very waiting in suspense to see what no, no, no is in reference to. Illogic Studios Reconstitution. Yes, we are talking, Reconstitution is a national conversation. We are talking about potential amendments that we may want to propose in the future to the Constitution, in line with what the founders expected, which is to amend the Constitution periodically, according to the needs of the time. So that's what we're doing here. And we're talking today about getting the two-party system to be a little less entrenched in our system, and to open up the possibility of third-party and independent candidates by using systems like ranked choice voting. Leonard, maybe the best way to implement both gerrymandering and ranked choice voting is to put an expiration in the gerrymandering clause based on how much ranked choice voting has diminished the two-party dominance. I love it. I love it. So let's talk about it. And I'm really looking forward to that conversation, Leonard, having an expiration, and having the expiration not be tied to a date, but tied to some specific criteria. So it's like a sunset provision, but it's not necessarily sunsetting on a specific time or day, but it's sunsetting based on the success of some other thing is interesting. We do that in other aspects of the reconstitutional proposals, not specifically to sunset reconstitutional proposals, but in ways we suggest that legislation is formed specifically on treaties and things like that, and we'll get into that in later sessions. But I do like that idea. X the Formerx, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your username. So what amendments do you believe should be added? Highly recommend going to our website, thereconstitution.com, click on the proposals, and we have a list of 22 of our highlighted proposals. You can also click to download the PDF of all of our amendments. But specifically what we're talking about today is ranked choice voting as a means to get the two-party system to be dismantled from owning our political process. That as being one amongst a couple of different proposals we have to get parties out of politics. But we have a whole bunch of amendments on separation of money in politics, around gerrymandering, around deliberative democracy, around corporations, around privacy and security and advertising, and everything that you can imagine. I'm sorry, Illogic Studios, that you think Reconstitution sounds bad. I would love to hear some constructive criticism on what about it sounds bad to you. Is it the name? Is it something else? We're open to feedback. Term limits. It's definitely something we're open to. We actually do have a proposal on term limits specifically for judges, or at least a way to rotate Supreme Court judges so that it doesn't become so politicized, and so that individuals don't have such a long-term stranglehold on policy and issues in this country. So that's one place. Term limits are an interesting thing to explore in the context of Congress as well. Something we've talked about, but we haven't found a compelling enough reason that would be a solution when there's other solutions that may be better. There's simply a lot of career politicians who are very old that we all sort of would like to get out of politics. But there's also a lot of old politicians who have wisdom, and we don't want to sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is why we're sort of avoiding term limits. We're still open to it, but we think there are better ways to get at the same problem. just sounds like a redo to the Constitution. We understand. Hopefully, what I've said has clarified. It is our aim. Is we want to reconstitute the country, but part of that is renewing our commitment to the original Constitution. And by the way, our commitment to the original Constitution, renewing that commitment, is a renewal to the commitment, renewal to the Constitution, renewal of our commitment to the Constitution, which includes Article 5 of the Constitution, which calls for or allows for a constitutional convention to amend the Constitution, which is a really beautiful thing. We just haven't used it. And exactly, Danny, I think I just captured what you said. Some people would say the Constitution is not a living document. For example, Antonin Scalia, the former or the late justice of the Supreme Court, who was an originalist, a textualist, felt that very much so it's not a living document. But what he did say is if there was one amendment he would pass, it would be an amendment to make it easier to amend the Constitution. So in that sense, he did see it as living. He just felt you need to use the Constitution to amend the Constitution, not that we can impose our own interpretation on it. Now, that itself is a controversial subject. Is there anything other than interpretation? We could debate that for hours, years, centuries. But the point is, to your point, it is meant to be amended. We have amended it 27 times. Some of those were really important, abolishing slavery. And we need to do it again and again and again. And yes, 5-0 Ghost, what we are calling for is not an Article 5 convention. What we are calling for is a national conversation to get to a point where we have enough points of agreement that it would call for having an Article 5 convention. We do not think here that we are ready for an Article 5 convention. We are too divided as a country. The point of this project is to bring the country together enough to have an Article 5 convention in a way that would actually be constructive and have a good output. We are not changing the Constitution. No conversation. Do not be afraid if you did not leave yet. I would love for you to not jump to the conclusion that we are changing the Constitution. We are suggesting amendments to the Constitution, but firstly, a conversation about what those changes would be. And I see you're saying no conversation, let's split. I'm really curious to see why this is not a conversation starter for you, or why you're not willing to have a conversation. We are not amending with the left. Please feel free to elaborate. Do you think we should never amend the Constitution again? Just freeze it as is? Do you think it should just be a certain group of people amending the Constitution? Alex was here. I don't think we are as split as social media says we are. I agree. I actually do agree. I do think we're very split because ultimately social media feeds into, right? Social media is a distorted reflection of reality. And reality sort of becomes a distorted reflection of social media, and it goes around and around and around in a circle. So social media is both a reflection of reality, but it's also creating reality. So we are very split, not as split as social media suggests. And we do have a proposal called that refers to the fact that social media brings out the worst in us. And we have ways, constitutional proposals of ways to make social media healthier. I think there are ways to do that. So look out for that, or you can check out our website at thereconstitution.com and look at that proposal more specifically, but we'll have more on that in the coming weeks. Let's see. Thank you so much, Neurospark. I always appreciate your support. Really great. And please reach out via DM. I'd happy to chat with you directly as well. You've been so supportive all along the way. Stay away from the Constitution. It's perfect the way it is. Iron Worker Blood. You don't see anything wrong with it. There's nothing that you would improve. We're open to suggestions. I would just say we have amended 27 times. A lot of those amendments were very good. Are there ones that you don't think were good? Do you think they were all bad? I mean, even the one where we abolished slavery. I don't know. I think we at least should have a conversation about it. Do not be afraid. I will tell you why WEF is running the Dems. We are not going to converse with depopulators. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're referring to as WEF or depopulators. Because at the end of the day, we're all American, and I don't care if you're red or blue. I love my country. I agree with you 100%. And I love people, and I care about people. And we're so hung up on these abstractions of you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you're a journalist, a media person, a politician. Everyone's human. Everyone's got mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and children, and we're trying to just live our lives and get by and eat food and survive and have a good time and enjoy ourselves and be healthy and have love in our lives. And we forget that because we're so tied up in these abstractions of each other, and it's just terrible. So yes, we're not red or blue. I love my country, and yes, I'm an American and I'm also a human. So like all of these things, we need to just start talking to each other. Government needs to be audited. Yes, that's sort of what this is about. It's having a conversation to audit what's working and what's not working. Let's see. Oh my gosh, so many comments. Thank you all. There's a process to amend the Constitution. It's so tough because it has to be a vast majority of the nation in favor of it. The founders knew that. Yes, 5-0 Ghost. I am assuming based on this that maybe not. I don't want to make any assumptions, but I do want to say what I just said a few minutes ago. I don't know if you were here for it, but the one amendment that the most conservative judge, maybe in my lifetime, Justice Scalia, the one amendment he suggested was an amendment to make it easier to amend the Constitution. Period. He said it shouldn't be this hard. And he actually outlined some math of the percentage of the country that it would take to get an amendment passed. And he specifically said it's just basically absurd. Let the southern states secede. They can't financially support themselves. I'd rather that we all stay on the same page. We sort of do contribute to each other's success. And it is nice to have diversity, even if that diversity is of opinion and of geography. You will never change the Constitution. We have changed it 27 times, so I would love to know why you think we can't. Imagine if the system actually benefited the majority. Neurospark. And honestly, it does benefit. It benefits the majority in a lot of ways. It benefits very small minorities in many ways, the 1%. So it benefits a lot of people in many different ways. It's just a matter of finding the most healthy way that it can benefit the most people in the most ways. Iron Worker Blood. No, I wouldn't. It has worked for this long, and if it isn't broken, don't fix it. But we've amended it 27 times, so we have fixed it before. You just don't think we'll ever have to again? I really want to challenge you on that assumption. If it passes the stringent process of amendment, it's important and needed. That's why I like the process. Yes, and as I just mentioned, Scalia felt that the process should be a little bit easier. Let's review. Your president is a World Economic Forum shill. Okay. Can you, and I assumed you were talking about WEF. Sorry, when you said WEF, that you were talking about the World Economic Forum. I just wanted to be clear. I understand your frustration with the establishment. I am also frustrated with the establishment. Joe Biden was not my number one choice. In fact, that's why we're talking today about people over party and ranked choice voting, so that I could have also voted for someone other than Joe Biden, but also have ranked Joe Biden in my preferences above some other people who I will not name, but do not believe are fit to be president. I do not personally believe that Joe Biden is totally fit to be president, to be honest. He's doing the best he can under the circumstances. I think there are many better candidates. There were many better candidates, and there could have been even more better candidates had we have a system that would allow for independent candidates, and we just don't. But calling him a shill, I mean, I don't know. I just can't say that confidently. I'm not on the inside. I haven't worked with those people, so I don't like to name call or make assumptions about people. All I know is who he is, what he stands for, what he says, and I think it's not all peaches. It's not. I don't agree with all of it. I think we can do better, but I also think we can do a lot worse. You can't get through these people. Okay. Oh my gosh, so many comments. Let's see. People just want to live. Nope. We are as far apart as two people can be. You are blind if you think the Dems are not globalists. I don't think I said that the Dems are not globalists. I actually believe that the Dems are globalists. I think the Republicans are globalists too, depending on which Dems you're talking about and which Republicans you're talking about. I think the far left is actually not very globalist, and I think the far right is actually not very globalist. I think the center is very globalist, and the center left is globalist, and the center right is globalist. And this is actually where the far left and the far right agree. It's why Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump both believed we needed to get out of NAFTA. That's the interesting thing about all of this, and why we actually have more things we can agree on than one would think. I don't believe in party lines. I'm a constitutionalist. That's great. That's great, Iron Worker Blood. So I would love to hear if you could make improvements to this country, what they would be. Because I don't know about you, but I don't love living in a country where we're all arguing all the time, for starters. So what are ways that you would improve that? We need verified voting. We should be able to verify our votes. I'd love to hear more about what your thoughts are on that, Stevie. It protects gun laws from these radical left-wingers. Iron Worker Blood, you can check one of my former videos about gun rights. I am not repealing the Second Amendment by any means, so I don't know if that alleviates some of your concerns. It is interesting that that's like your number one concern, and I understand it because it is obviously an issue that's talked a lot about in the media and by politicians. But I do think that that's done to divide us and to get your votes ultimately more than anything. I don't think that there's a reason that that is seen as such an important issue other than to try to garner votes on both sides, to be honest with you. Thank you, Danny. I would love to find ways for people to comprehend more what I'm saying. That's why I'm doing this. Ranked choice voting is interesting. We seem to get equally bad candidates on both sides. Exactly, Shazam. Many videos of Biden being racist and touching kids wrong. Okay, well, that's fine. The two-party system is not fine, but I mean, you can interpret that however you want. There's deep fakes out there, and there's editing that can make things look like however you want them to be. I judge people based on the decisions they make and the words that come out of their mouth. The two-party system is literally perfect. No corruption, no fraud, no bias. Not sure if there's sarcasm there, OJW, but if you truly believe that, I'd love to hear more about why you believe that, when it's pretty most people are pretty much on the same page on that one. Sorry, I'm lagging behind your stream a little. Okay. Need to get out of Paris Accord I don't think you completed your sentence there, Stevie. If you give them an inch and they will take a mile. So if you let the government alter amend it. I've heard that take a lot, Iron Worker Blood. Give them an inch and they'll take a mile. And I understand that concern, but I don't think that's a way that we can operate in this country. If nobody's giving an inch ever, then we're basically in trench warfare. That's World War I. We're just stuck. So we have to be willing to talk about issues and give an inch here and give an inch there. And we all also have to come to a place where we're not asking for a mile on either side. And if we can all get to that place, then we can have conversations. And that's what this project is about. Yes, we're talking about constitutional amendments, but ultimately what we're talking about is having a national conversation so that amendments would be something that is even considerable, because we can't consider it right now because everyone's so afraid that if they give an inch, the other side will take a mile. I would love to hear your thoughts after checking out the Come James is a Godsend. I'm not sure what you're referring to there, NeuroSpark. Feel free to send me more info. You do have a point there. Thank you, Iron Worker Blood. I really appreciate that. It's really important that we start talking to each other, and the inch mile thing is I've had that exact conversation. I talk to people in rural Wisconsin about, guns and things like that. And I understand they live in different places. Like, don't take my guns. If you institute this regulation, that suddenly it's going to be that regulation. I understand that fear, and both sides have that fear. We have to stop that mentality. It is in the way of getting things done. And again, the reason that we have that mentality is because of this two-party system. It really is. The two-party system is just like the media. It is feeding its constituents, its people, the members of its party, all of these stories about the other side, making them out to be these evil villains. Why? To scare them into continuing to support them, to continue giving money to them, to continue giving votes to them. It is a manipulation tactic to maintain and continue to maintain power. And so that's why ranked choice voting is so important, because we need to have political independence. We need to have independent candidates so that we can declare independence from these parties that are running the show. Individuals, we all have our own opinions, and yet for some reason we keep bowing and worshiping these parties. And the reason for that is because they're in the way, and they have all the power to make sure that they keep the power. Exactly, iron worker blood. The people aren't as much of the problem as the government is, and the government is based on this two-party system and run by this two-party system. I agree two-party system is so flawed we can agree fully on. And that's where we are. I'm glad we came to a point of agreement, and I'm glad Iron Worker Blood, I applaud you. I know we started on a note of relative disagreement, but I would encourage you, again, and I know you're on TikTok, so you don't see on our YouTube stream, we have our principles, the Reconstitution's principles, scrolling at the bottom of the screen at all times, which are curiosity, humility, respectfulness, patience, resilience, creativity. And what I mean by all of those things is just being open-minded, being willing to listen to people, being respectful to people, being patient with people, and being resilient, as in don't get so triggered so easily. Don't be a snowflake of the left, and don't be like a knee-jerk reaction of the right. Just cool it. Let's just talk. It's not, nobody's punching anyone in the, we're just having a conversation. I may say something that I regret later, and you know what? Forgive me. We all do. We're imperfect. But if I'm constantly trying to prevent myself from saying the wrong thing, then I won't get to our last principle, which is being creative. We have to be able to take risks in what we say to get to really interesting solutions and to have conversations. And we need to not penalize and punish each other for every word we say that's wrong, because we're human. So that's what this project is all about, having conversations. And yes, thank you, Iron. I applaud you for applauding me, not to get all circular about this, but I appreciate it. Do follow us. One of my favorite things to do is someone who comes on to my comments, my DMs, our live stream, and has an initial knee-jerk reaction of sort of ridicule or disagreement, and ends up becoming a friend. And when I say a friend, also someone who joins our project, because ultimately you're our best critic. My job as part of as being a conversation facilitator, as being a framer, is to work to use the principles I just outlined to help you and us channel that criticism from being sort of trolly, and I'm not calling you a troll, but we're all trolls these days, into something that's constructive and to something that's substantive, and to talk about the actual things that we believe in and why we believe in them. And that's the key. And so I would love for you to join our movement. I would love to work with you to help figure these issues out. So please feel free to DM me, and I will rope you into this to the extent that you're willing to, because there's nothing I love more than a critic, a firm critic. And you came in as one. And I'm glad that we got to a point where your criticism is now constructive. Let's see. Letting people out. There's nothing wrong with the current Constitution. I'm sorry, Extron, that you're in so late, but we've had this conversation already, and I would encourage you to go back and watch some of our videos. We're not saying there's anything wrong with the current Constitution. We're just saying it can be better. In the words of the Constitution itself, we can become more perfect. We know that there's no such thing as perfect, but we can constantly become more perfect. And that's why we have within the Constitution an article that allows us to amend the Constitution. Danny, thank you for your comment about ignorance and voting. That's why we want to get party names off ballots, because if you don't know the candidate and you're just voting for them because they have a certain party name on it, you probably shouldn't be voting for them. Also, let's just improve education in this country. That's why I work in education. Maybe that'll help with some of that. We should abolish the party system. TikTok Teddy, I wish you were here a little bit earlier. We're not saying to abolish the party system. We're saying because it's impossible. People have the right to free assembly. Parties are inevitable in the history of humanity as part of human nature. But we can constitutionalize that parties shouldn't have control over government. There's a difference there. Yes, agreed, Ironworker Blood. Two-party system, just like the media to an extent is, and social media to an extent, is manipulating and brainwashing people against each other. And that's why I'm trying to have these conversations to, it's a word I haven't used yet here, but I will start to, called exdoctrinate. There's indoctrination going on. I want to exdoctrinate, and we will always have our biases, etc. But the key is to become aware of these biases and why we have these biases. And then we can actually make creative solutions, insightful comments, etc., and we can have constructive dialogue. Should have to pick all government officials. Should have to pick independent, Republican, Democrat. I'm not sure I understand, Stevie. We have a loud voice speaking for us, but no representing us called the government. I'm not sure I followed that completely, Iron Worker Blood. How do you find out info about new candidates? Most info is junk. It's another good point, and this is why we need to improve our media ecosystem. Another proposal that we have coming in the next few weeks, so look out for that. When it comes to things such as abortion and such, will we ever find the common ground, though? Stay tuned. We do have an amendment that touches on this without touching on it. And I know that sounds confusing, but we will talk about it. The moral of the story here is, similarly, abortion is used as a wedge issue to get voters by both sides. And the problem is, once again, because there's this two-party system, everything is turned into this binary thing. You're either pro-choice or pro-life. But I don't think there's many pro-choice people who believe that you should be able to, end a baby's life the second before it comes out of the womb. I don't think there's a lot of pro-life people who believe that in banning contraception, right? But for some reason, we've made it like one or the other, pro-choice, pro-life. There's a whole spectrum of nuance within there. And again, in order to figure out what we want to regulate us as a society, it's just about having a conversation. And we can't have that conversation because we are so divided by these parties, by this media ecosystem, to choose this side or choose that side. It's more complicated than that. Stop making me choose one or the other. We can have a conversation. So third-party voter here. Great, Red Foreman. Hope you join us. We are very pro ranked choice voting. That's what this conversation has been about. We are going to wrap up today because we're already a little over time. But first, I just want to make sure Leonard had one more question. Sorry, Leonard. Maybe the best way to implement both is to put... Oh, we already discussed this. Sorry. I got that comment already. Loved Joe Jorgensen's nuclear power idea. Also, similarly, there's some great ideas out there by independent candidates. That's why we want independent. That's why we want ranked choice voting, and we want to get parties out of parliamentary procedures and off of ballots, because independent candidates have really creative solutions. And if we empower them, we empower ourselves, and we can build this democracy back up. And we can unshackle ourselves. It can be a new declaration of independence, political independence from the two-party system, and for us as individuals to have our own stances without being manipulated by a political party, by an ideology, by a charismatic leader, by a media pundit. We are all people, and we are underestimating our own intelligence. And in fact, probably dumbing down our own intelligence because we just have been asked to follow people and teams blindly, and we need to end that. And so that's why we want to put the people over parties, and we want ranked choice voting, and we want parties out of parliamentary procedures and off of ballots. So thank you so much. Thank you for adding me. Ironworker Blood, our next live will be, we do this every Thursday. We're going to start doing them every other Thursday. So actually it won't be next Thursday. It'll be the Thursday after that. So it'll be the 22nd of September. But please do feel free to DM us, comment on our social media. We're going to be posting a lot more videos on TikTok. We have another interesting session coming up on a political quiz we're releasing to help you better understand your own politics. We have a lot going on. The Reconstitution.com is really the home for all of the information. You can also order a physical copy of the Reconstitution if you want it for your reference, and if you want to support our movement. Sorry, the green screen is going crazy. That's on our website as well. So that's it. And thank you, Ironworker. It was great to build this bridge with you. Any other questions? I think we're good. I think we finally made it. Thank you, Ironworker Blood. It's on in PDF form on the website as well, in case you just want to use that. But we would love to have your support in buying the book, of course. Okay, thank you all. Great session. We'll be back in 2 weeks to discuss what is our next topic. I think in 2 weeks we'll be talking about this political quiz, but substantively, I think we'll start moving on to the nature of corporations. What is the relationship between corporations and people? Stay tuned for that. For now, ranked choice voting, get the two-party system out of politics. Thanks. See you soon. Bye now.